Hello, everyone, and welcome to our parent webinar this evening. Thank you to all of you who are joining us live. I can see our attendees slowly starting to trickle in, and I want to thank all of you who are watching a recording of this presentation as well. For those of you who are joining us live, I think what we'll do is just give ourselves maybe a couple of minutes just to allow all of our live attendees to come in. I think what I'll also do for Tara and Justin is I'll just unmute you so that you're able to just chime in and give us a little word of welcome.
Thank you, Teodora. This is Justin Black. I am the Director of Curriculum and Technology for Rochester School District, and excited to have Teodora on tonight with us, and thank Tara Johnson for working with Teodora to get this lined up, and hopefully provide parents with some tools tonight that will definitely help with that K-5 group of making sure that we're setting some good technology expectations. I know myself with a 15-year-old, it's a process and it can be time consuming, but I think Teodora will provide some good things. And then also know that we are a resource to also help you here at the school district as you have questions and put you in the right direction for information and whatnot. So with that said, I'm going to hand it back over to you, Teodora, and thank you very much for being here tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Justin. Before I go on, Tara, I just wanted to check if you maybe wanted to say anything or whether I should just carry on.
I just want to say thank you very much for your help and your assistance tonight. And we're looking forward to hearing what you have to give us tonight. So thank you,
Sure.
Teodora. We appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, Tara. Thank you so much. Thank you both. It's really wonderful to work with a school district that just really understands the importance of protecting children online, not just through the use of the usual types of technology that we use, or various filtering options and monitoring and classroom management. And there are a lot of great tech-based solutions to this challenge. Justin used the word process. It certainly is a process, but educating the community is incredibly important as well. And that is basically what my role is at BlindWise, which is the organization that I'm coming to you from. My background's in psychology and parent coaching. I'm also a certified digital wellness educator, and I have the role of being the director of community engagement at BlindWise. And so I feel very strongly about not just using the tech-based solutions to try and keep children safer online, also healthier, make sure that their digital well-being is really good, making sure that they're sort of informed and educated digital citizens. I think it's incredibly important to also speak to parents, to also speak to educators, really to have that 360-degree view and make sure that everyone who is around that child really understands what some of the ins and outs are. Again, to use Justin's word of this process. The other thing that I wanted to say, it's really great to speak to this particular group of parents. So the parents who have children, they're a little bit more sort of on the younger side, because of course, when we set up some of those good boundaries and some of those good expectations, when they're younger, the younger they are, the easier it becomes as they get older. So I'm always excited to speak to this group of parents. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you. If you just bear with me there for a second. All right, and I want to begin with a little bit of a refresher, and I say refresher because we have done sort of collaborated on parent webinars before with Rochester. So if some of you maybe attended the previous one that we had, it's been quite a while now, or you've seen the recording, some of this information might be familiar to you, but I know that we're likely going to have a lot of sort of new parents watching this as well. So I just wanted to make sure to tell you a little bit about this partnership that we have with your school district and all this really fantastic information and support and education that your district is providing you with. So they're essentially doing that through our community digital wellness program, which has 3 pillars. The first one that you may or may not be familiar with is the Online Safety Hub, which is a really fantastic resource full of guides and lots of supporting material in there for you as a parent. I will be doing a little demonstration demonstration of the Online Safety Hub for you in a second. I want to show you some of the things that I'll be talking to you about during this presentation that will help you set up some of those healthy boundaries. I want to show you where you can find those resources inside the hub that will sort of guide you through how to do that process. So I will take you through the Online Safety Hub at the very end of this presentation. The second pillar of our program is the parent app. It's called Custodio, that we launched relatively recently at your school district. I'll be talking to you a little bit about the app a little bit later on, but won't be focusing too much on it for this particular presentation. Of course, if you have any questions around it, please do let us know. And then the third and final, and one of the most important elements of what we do with this program is these parent webinars. So really having this opportunity to speak to your community directly, to give you a little bit more of a sort of deeper dive on a lot of these topics, and also, of course, give you that opportunity to ask any questions should you have any. The final thing that I just want to say is that we have a really fantastic group of online safety and digital wellness experts who are part of the team that I'm a part of as well. Inside LineWise, we have backgrounds in psychology, child development, teaching. Some of us were technology teachers. Some of us are safeguarding experts, former police officers even. So we're a very small group, but there's a lot of really diverse experience and expertise and knowledge there as well. And there is an about section inside of your Online Safety Hub where you'll be able to go and read up a little bit more about each one of us, just so that you sort of understand who the people are who are giving you all of this really, really important advice around how to parent your digital native. So I encourage you to, when you head over into the Online Safety Hub, to check that about section as well. You'll hear me mentioning the Online Safety Hub a lot. During this presentation, we really do think about it as sort of the beating heart of our community digital wellness program. So this is the URL for your district's Online Safety Hub. You can head on over and check it out. You can also use this, this QR code as well. It will take you straight in there. And as I mentioned, I will be spending the last sort of 5 minutes or so of this presentation taking you into the Online Safety Hub. So what I want to talk to you about over the next sort of 25 to 30 minutes that we'll be together is these three sort of key areas that I want to cover. I'm going to first talk to you a little bit about some of the key online safety risks that children face today. Again, if you did watch a previous webinar, this is one component that I always include in all of the webinars whenever I talk to parents. I wanted to sort of present it to you or deliver it to you a little bit differently this evening, because I really want to give you that perspective of setting up boundaries and the importance of setting up expectations with this perspective in mind of how they can help out with a lot of these online safety risks that we know all children are facing. Not all of them will necessarily have a direct experience of them, but we know that we can expect that many of them will. So I want to kind of give you that angle on those 8 key online safety risks and share with you some tips and some ideas that you can utilize in your own home. I then want to talk to you a little bit about what we refer to as the ABC approach to online safety management. So this is going to be another really sort of proactive and action-packed section of this webinar, because I want to share a lot of practical tips with you. That's always the sort of the most important goal of all of the work we really do within the Community Digital Wellness Program. Is I want you to be able to walk away from this presentation having an idea of at least, say, 3 things that you can start doing with your child, either for the very first time if you've never done it before, or as a sort of reminder of something that you know you should be doing anyway, but this is just sort of going to reinforce it for you. So I'll be sharing some tips around how to manage your child's access to their devices. Again, I'll be talking about boundaries, so B's for boundaries, and then finally talking to you about sort of the importance of talking to your children about online safety and digital wellness. Even if you do have a kindergartner, it's never too early to begin having these conversations. So as soon as your child starts interacting with the internet, starts interacting with devices, with the online world, that is the time when we start talking to them if nothing else, about how we manage our own usage. So, for example, starting some of those screen time conversations with them when they're very, very young. And then third and final, as I mentioned before, I want to take you through sort of a little tour of the Online Safety Hub, some of the different resources from the hub that I'll be talking about during those first two sections. I want to show you exactly where you can locate them inside your Online Safety Hub, and those will be resources that are very specific to this topic of setting up boundaries and sharing those expectations that you have of your children with them. Those resources will really help you to do that. So this is a sort of layout of the 8 key online safety risks that we and other experts like ourselves from around the world really have identified as being particularly problematic. As I said, not every single child will experience every single one of these risks, luckily, but we know that these are sort of lurking online. We know that these are lurking within sort of children's devices, and these are things that we sort of need to be mindful of in order to make sure, again, for one, that they're safer when they're online, so that they're really able to take in all of the benefits, of which there's so many, of the online world. But we also want to really make sure that they can stay safe while they're there, that they can have more positive experiences while they're there. And like I said before, just generally be good, responsible digital citizens in that online world. So I want to tell you, as I said, share with you a few tips around each one of these when it comes to the importance of setting up some boundaries. And again, really, it's all about communicating your expectations with your children and having that ongoing conversation with them. So you'll notice that some of these, certainly the first one, pornography and sexual content, if you do have a very young child, this won't be a risk that you will be too sort of preoccupied with until your child gets to be a little bit older. It's still really important that you're mindful of the fact that unfortunately there is a lot of sort of inappropriate adult content out there on the internet, so that even if your child is very young, they still might sort of stumble upon it. It happens, and you know, we've heard a lot of stories both from the clients that we work with, but also sort of from our personal lives. So one of the most important things to remember is that a lot of children stumble upon this content by accident. So it's not that they're intentionally seeking this type of content out. And one thing to be very, very mindful of, and again, to include that in your conversations with your children, is that it's really important to be mindful of the types of search terms that we use online, because some of them are quite conducive to stumbling upon inappropriate content. One really, really common example that we use all the time, that's a perfectly innocent example, if your child or you even really put in a search term like a pussycat or something like that, you might end up with inappropriate content coming out, links or videos or whatever other form of media. So one thing to keep in mind is that those search terms can be quite tricky, and they can sometimes lead us down that path. So it's just something to sort of keep in mind. Another really important tip here is, and again, something that you want to start communicating with your children as early as possible, is to get them into the habit of sharing with you if they do come across any content that is upsetting, that is inappropriate, that is dangerous, that is threatening, you know, whatever sort of negative word you might attach to it, whatever it is, that they always report that to you and they always let you know about that. What we typically find is that when parents start having these conversations with their children when they're quite young, they're much more likely to actually share with them when they come across content that they know that they just shouldn't be seeing. So those are a few things to keep in mind with that particular risk. When it comes to screen time and device use, I'll be talking a lot more about that when I share that ABC approach with you around that. But for one thing that we always recommend with screen time, again, starting this as early as possible, is to set up a screen routine for your child. And again, I'll be showing you inside the Online Safety Hub where you're going to be able to find some templates that will help you do that in case you need a little bit of guidance and maybe a few ideas around how to do that. But even just doing that for yourself, really, even before your child sort of becomes verbal, if they're interacting with some kind of technology, you can set up some rules for yourself in terms of how you're going to sort of limit and control their screen time and device use. And again, really make sure that they're reaping the benefits of that activity and are not going to suffer some of the downsides. Like, for example, interruption of sleep is one of the most frequent ones that we find. And there's been a lot of studies done around this issue in adolescents, but we know that it can be very disruptive for younger children as well. Right. So setting up that screen routine, which is incredibly important, setting up a designated space in your home where devices will be kept is another really, really important one. Sort of joint up to that one is also to make sure that devices are wherever they're located, they're certainly not located inside bedrooms overnight. So that's a habit that, again, you want to sort of start and build that with your children as as early as possible. When children are younger, to also try as much as possible not to have them spend too much time with sort of in solitary use of their devices, especially not for prolonged periods of time. The research sort of, I think it's common sense really, finds that the more time that children spend online, of course, the more likely that they're going to be exposed to certain online risks. So if we have, say, a 6-year-old, we certainly don't want to leave them on the internet unattended alone for hours and hours and hours and hours at a time, right? So solitary use, we want to try and minimize as much as possible. We want to use appropriate parental controls. And again, I'll be talking to you just a little bit about the Custodio app in a few minutes. I think a lot of you would have downloaded the app already. So using either free or paid parental controls is totally fine. And then setting up what is referred to as a tech contract or a tech agreement. Sometimes it's called a family agreement or contract as well. Again, I'll be showing you where you can locate the templates for that inside the Online Safety Hub as well. But a tech contract is another really, really great way to very, very clearly get across to your child what your expectations are around how they're going to be using their devices, when they're going to be using them, what types of platforms and apps they're going to be accessing on them, what are your expectations around how much time they're going to be spending there, all the way down to what your expectations are in terms of how they interact with other people online if they're at that age where they are using their devices in order to sort of to communicate and to be social. So a tech agreement is a really fantastic thing. One of our top tips for families. It's a fantastic exercise that can bring a family together. The younger your child is, of course, the more sort of authority you will have and control over how to set that contract up. What we always then recommend is as children slowly start getting older, certainly as they start entering into those sort of middle school years, certainly high school, you then take a sort of a slightly different, a little bit more of a flexible approach where you do really ask for a lot of their input and you increasingly ask for their input as they get older around what some of these limits and sort of and restrictions and opportunities are as well, and what they think about them if they feel that those can sort of be reshaped a little bit. When it comes to online bullying, I mentioned earlier in the context of tech contracts, how important it is to identify sort of your children's online behavior in terms of how they communicate with other people. And primarily what I mean by that is the language that they use. So the type of tone in which they quote unquote speak online, as well as the type of vocabulary, right? The type of language that they use with other people. When it comes to online bullying, this is one of the biggest sort of issues that we find once we look at teenagers and their experiences of online bullying. They frequently underreport the sort of the frequency with which they act in not necessarily overtly bullying kinds of ways, but just act inappropriately, not in a particularly perhaps pleasant or supportive kind of way. So they will engage in negative online behaviors. But when you ask them whether they've ever engaged in online bullying, very few will actually say yes. And we find that often the case is that they just don't consider what we would consider to be bullying to actually be bullying. And so one of the things that we need to do is to start teaching them very early on about language and about how we interact and communicate with people when we're online, and also really just consider how we expect our children to behave offline when they're speaking to people in their everyday life. I will apologize for the sirens in the background. But consider how you expect them to behave with people around them, with their peers, with people who are older than them offline, and really encourage them to transfer those skills when it comes to the online world as well. This will be incredibly important in terms of a preventative measure to make sure that the chances of them bullying somebody else are going to be as low as possible. But what this is also going to mean is that as they get older, they'll be a lot better at recognizing when somebody else is perhaps being bullied, and then they're going to be a lot more likely to engage in what we call positive bystander behavior. So they're going to come to the aid of somebody who is potentially being bullied. The greatest power we have in terms of reducing bullying as such a huge issue online is to really start teaching children about what bullying actually is as early as possible. What do we mean by bullying? What are all the different types of things that can be considered bullying and negative online behaviors, right? One of the very, very big ones that we find is very problematic is language. And what we also often find in all the research done around this, when we talk to young people, they've sort of come to accept that the way people speak in the online world is not the same as in the offline world. They sort of allow themselves a lot more room to be more negative or more critical or more hurtful. And often when we ask children, why didn't you jump in, for example, to help somebody, couldn't you tell that they were being bullied by somebody else? Children will often say, but that's just how people speak online. I didn't think anything of it. I just thought that was normal. And so that's why I didn't think to really intervene. I didn't think to report it to the platform. I didn't think to tell my teacher or my parent or anybody else, right? So you can already see there how they've built up this sort of expectation of their own around this is how we show up online and this is how we speak to each other. And this is something that as parents, you and then as educators, of course, these are the two groups that have the most power to try and change that from very early on for children. When it comes again to grooming, this is another one that you're not going to be too worried about if your child is more sort of in the younger age range. But again, especially once they get into sort of middle school and again, moving into high school, this might become a little bit more sort of an issue, of a problem. What we want to do there to try and reduce the chances of this happening as much as possible is to first of all get our children used to this question of what information, personal information, do we share online and what do we not share online? So what do we actually kind of put out there, into the metaverse, into the online universe, and what are the things that we keep for ourselves? So things like the exact address of where you live, the exact location, information around when mom and dad or whoever the guardian is at home are home, when they're not at home. These are the types of information that groomers will actively seek out, and they will sort of trace that over a certain period of time, very kind of methodically. And then when they catch those moments when a child is alone, or they know there's a lot of solitary use, for example, of technology, that is when they will then slowly start sort of working their way in, if you will, just because they'll have so much really valuable information. So personal information, what do we share? What do we not share? Incredibly important. Who do we share this information with? So for example, maybe certain information is all right to share through a direct message with one of your best friends on Instagram, but you wouldn't share that just sort of out in public. You wouldn't create a story on Instagram and share that information, or you wouldn't send out a tweet that contains that information, right? So some of those nuances around what we share and who we share that with, and also to sort of to remind them of the fact, and I'll say this a few more times as well throughout the presentation, whatever goes online just stays online, right? It's permanent and it's forever, and it's really important for children to keep that in mind. Another sort of tool that's incredibly helpful here is certainly the tech agreement, right? Because that is where you can again get those expectations across and put in some rules in place around these are the types of information that we don't share with anybody. These are the types that we'll maybe share privately with our closest friends, with your aunt, your sibling, your grandmother, your nanny, whoever it is. And then, this is the stuff that never, ever goes out anywhere, certainly not online. When it comes to digital footprints, it's actually interesting because a lot of the recommendations there are actually quite similar to the recommendations around the grooming risk for slightly different reasons, though. So when we're talking about digital footprint, we're really talking about this sort of trail that we all leave when we're online, as we interact, as we create content, as we consume content. And we know, and this is something that we often share with high schoolers and then with actually college students as well, is that employers are increasingly starting to really comb the internet when they're about to hire somebody to see what their digital footprint is, whether through their social media channels, if they have websites, chat rooms that they may have been a part of that are public chat rooms, gaming platforms, whatever it might be. So once your children sort of get to that age, they'll understand a lot more and they'll kind of feel it on their own skin, so to speak, why it's so important to really manage their digital footprint. But when they're younger, again, we can introduce this topic through some of the same things, some of the same sort of conversations we can have as the ones around grooming. So what are the types of information that we do and that we don't want to share? What type of information that is absolutely unacceptable to share, and we never want to disclose that? How do you present yourself? So again, similar to that online bullying issue of what's the kind of language that you use, and how do you communicate with people when you're online? So it's really all about that sort of that mindful technology use, with the knowledge that whatever goes online, it stays online and it stays there forever. There's no such thing as completely removing it. And again, the earlier that we can get children used to that concept, the more mindful and careful they're going to be in terms of how they interact with technology. The privacy and settings risks arguably is one of the easiest ones to manage, really, because pretty much, every physical device that you use, every platform, every app has built-in solutions to this problem. Some of them are better than others, right? But whatever device you might be using, there will be built-in privacy and data privacy settings in there that I would absolutely recommend you activate. Again, you'll be able to find instructions on all of this inside the Online Safety Hub. Whatever social media platforms you're using, or if one of your children is starting to sort of slowly think about creating an account on a particular platform, or they already have one, it's going into that platform, really combing through their privacy settings and making sure that you switch on whatever sort of protections are available there. And then of course using parental controls where appropriate, and really doing all of those things to make sure that we can be as safe as possible, that we use sort of just what we've been given by default by all of these different virtual spaces. One of the more specific tips there that I think is really, really important, and it's very important for you to convey that to your child, is that when they do decide to create a specifically social media account, but this is important for gaming too, that they're honest about their age. A lot of platforms have now done the really necessary work to make sure that depending on the young person's age, the sort of experience that they're offered within that platform is going to be very different. And that's certainly true of places like TikTok and of Instagram as well. So that if you enter the age of 13 as opposed to 16, you will have a very different experience there. So it's incredibly important that when your child does finally access these platforms, that they do use their actual age. Gaming and gaming behaviors, this is, I think, relevant to parents across the board, sort of regardless of how old your child is. There are a few specific sort of things there that we always recommend parents think about as their children are interacting with games, or just before they're about to sort of step into a new gaming world. For one is to always check the content first. So check the appropriateness of that content. Your tech contract can help you there as well, because you can have rules around this is the type of content that we're okay with, and this is the type of game that you can play, and then these are some of the ones that are perhaps a little bit iffy. We can discuss these, and then these are the ones that are that are absolutely not okay with you, or not yet, rather, until you become a little bit older, a little bit more mature. So content is important. Are there any chat features within that particular game? If there are chat features, how much control can you have over them? So can you have some control over who your child can contact and how contactable they can be? Can they play on, a private versus a public server, and things like that? So really there we're thinking in terms of contact with strangers. That's sort of the biggest thing. And then finally, you also want to consider how immersive that particular game or platform is. All of them are made to be very immersive. Some have done a better job than others. And again, this is where your child's, not just their age, but really their maturity level, which you'll know best. That will tell you a lot in terms of what's appropriate for them to play. If they have a very difficult time controlling their screen time, putting down a particular sort of screen-based activity and transitioning into a different activity, if they find that transition to be very difficult, then they're probably not ready for some of those very, very sort of potentially, immersive experiences. So those are some of the main ones to think about in terms of setting some boundaries around gaming behaviors. And then finally, this is another risk here that you won't be concerned with yet. For sure, certainly not if you, if you have a kindergartner or or sort of a child around that age. But sexting and nudes is something that's starting to sort of become an issue at a younger age, sometimes even with, sort of 11, 12, 13-year-olds. So over there are a host of other conversations that you can start having with your children from a younger age that can sort of prep them for that once they get into that age range where they start becoming curious, about some of these things. For one, to really normalize that curiosity. Children develop in all sorts of different ways. They develop academically, they develop emotionally, they develop sexually too, and in so many other ways. And so they get to that stage where they're very curious about things, and that's perfectly normal and healthy. But we want to make sure that they're keeping certain things in mind before they become tempted to either send someone a nude or to sex someone or to receive that from somebody else. So talking to them about things like consent when it comes to your body, but consent when it comes to sharing information about your body, or sharing photographs or videos or whatever type of media that is. Talking about privacy again. So talking about how we can protect our privacy online on the different sort of devices that we use, the virtual spaces we frequent. And then again, back to that idea of online is permanent, online is forever. There's no such thing as, a disappearing message, regardless of what Snapchat may try to tell us. And the other thing is the power of screenshotting, right? Even if you send a private personal photo to somebody, you have to always remember that they can screenshot that and then they can share it with other people. So these are some of the main things that I wanted to share with you. I shared a lot of information here. So if there are any points that you've forgotten, you can definitely feel free to reach out to me and let me know, and just ask me any questions around these if you'd like. So this is the next section that I want to get through before I just take you into the hub to show you a few of those different pieces that I mentioned earlier. So this is the sort of the aspect of how we manage access, set up those boundaries, and also keep that communication ongoing with our children. So when it comes to managing access, as I mentioned before, we're talking about what the child has access to on their device, and then also when. So it's both the what and the when that's incredibly important. I've mentioned the importance of using parental control tools before. When children are a little bit younger, certainly when they're sort of around, that kindergarten age, and even for a few years after that, it's all right to use free options. They can still provide you with a lot of functionality, but certainly as children get older and their internet usage, digital usage becomes a lot more complex, it's oftentimes better to opt in for some of those paid options, because they will just give you a lot more functionality, and just sort of allow you to be in there, so to speak, in a much better way. What we also always recommend is that parents avoid the sort of sneaky option of trying to use any of these parental control options in a secretive kind of way. It really goes a long way in being detrimental to that trust that you're trying to build with your child. It's arguably even more difficult to build nowadays, because we all use this technology and so easier for us to sort of escape into our devices. So trust is incredibly important throughout this whole process. You're doing something that's very difficult. Setting up boundaries with any person is incredibly hard. With your children, sometimes it can be the hardest thing that you have to do. So you want to make sure that you're able to do that while still preserving that trust that you have with your child, which becomes increasingly important, right, as they become teenagers. Utilizing your online safety hub as much as possible. This is a website, so it's a 24/7 open all the time resource that you can use. When it comes to platforms, games, we have an app and game review section. We have over 300 that we've reviewed so far, and we're constantly adding more. So please do go in there, check out the age ratings for all of these platforms, and then allow those guides to sort of inform the decisions that you make there. And as I mentioned before, really utilizing any of the built-in privacy controls that you can use. So Google Safe Search exists, YouTube Restricted Mode exists as well. Switching off autoplay on YouTube. We have some of these little tools that are really the easiest to use when it comes to sort of making those online experiences safer for our children. So it's really important that we do actually utilize these. Speaking of parental controls, I just wanted to throw a little bit of this information in, just in case you're not that familiar with Custodio, our parental control tool. It will give you some ongoing visibility on your child's activity on their school issued device. And I will show you where inside the Online Safety Hub you can find a little bit more information about this app, and you can also set it up just in case you haven't done that yet. So when we're talking about setting boundaries, I've used the word sort of clear and direct and explicit before. It's really important to be all of those things when we're talking about these boundaries and these expected behaviors. Using those digital or tech contracts is incredibly important. Again, identifying those clear off times, especially at nighttime, and to really limit that device use in bedrooms after children have gone to bed, and to just remove those devices there completely. One of the hardest but most important things for parents to do here is to really model the same kinds of behaviors that they expect of their children. And this can be very challenging. But what this means in practice is that, for example, if you set up a rule in your home that there won't be any devices during meal times, it's incredibly important that you take the lead on that, and that you make sure that your child doesn't ever see you with a device during mealtime, right? Children will, to a certain extent, follow what we tell them verbally and directly, but they're a lot more likely to copy and paste really what we do if we just show it to them, if we just demonstrate kind of what our expectations are. So they're a lot less likely to actually put the phone away if we go put the phone away, as opposed to if we put our own phone away. And that's just one small example. There are lots of different ways in which you can use modeling to get that across, those expectations that you have. And then finally, the communication piece. What we find is that the children who tend to report having the most sort of positive experiences online and the least number of the negative ones are children who live in homes where these conversations are really frequent, where they talk to the adults in their lives really often about all of these different topics to do with online safety and digital wellness and digital citizenship and you know, how to be safer online, how do we report when incidents happen, how do we speak to other people online, how do we sort of self-manage when it comes to, you know, how much we use of all of this technology, and really having that conversation with them will show them that you're curious, that you're positively engaged, that you want to know and you want to be there. You want to be a part of your child's life. We frequently find, and this is something that parents are often quite surprised to hear, that children are actually asking for more of our involvement. It's just the type of involvement that they're looking for doesn't always sort of coincide with what we want to give them, what we want to provide them with. So what children are really asking for is for us to not necessarily solve the problems for them. So if an online bullying issue happens, they want us to show up and say, I'm a resource for you. I can help you problem solve this. What would be the best outcome for you? How can I help you? How can I help you sort of, you know, make that happen? Can I help you block somebody? Can we report something? Can we send a message to somebody to apologize if that's what's needed? You know, whatever the case is, they want us to be there sort of with them, as opposed to just be standing there and sort of talking at them, and sort of barking commands, if you will, and letting them know in that way what our expectations are. We still want to set expectations and boundaries. It's incredibly important. We never sort of don't want to do that. It's just how we do it really that's incredibly important. And as your children get older, as you start getting, you know, more frequently those like one-word answers, yes, no, grunt, sigh, you want to make sure that you don't jump in to sort of either answer your own question or give that clarifying question. You want to leave a little bit of space for your children to really step in, and again, to let you know how you can be more of a resource for them. So with that, I'm just going to switch over into your district's Online Safety Hub, and just very quickly show you a few of these different resources that I was talking about. If you haven't been inside the hub yet, I definitely encourage you to head on over and check out all these different sections that we have here. I mentioned the app and game review section earlier. The about section is there as well. Online Safety Tech is where you'll be able to find all those really sort of annoying and boring instructions for how to activate privacy settings and parental controls on different platforms and devices. So I do encourage you to go in there. I know parents don't like that stuff. It's probably their least favorite stuff when it comes to online safety, but it's really important that we know how to do that for our kids. And then the parent advice is where you'll find all of our blogs, all of our guides, all of that good stuff. And then the parent app, I'll click into this just very quickly to let you know that this is where you'll be able to find information about Custodio. And by clicking on this Try Now button is where you'll be able to set it up in case you haven't done that just yet. And then inside the parent advice section, I just quickly want to show you where you'll be able to find some of those templates that I mentioned earlier. So if you go into the starting out section, you have this creating a tech agreement piece, and then you have the screen routines piece as well. So I'll just very quickly click on this one just to sort of give you a sense of what this looks like. So if you scroll down, you'll be able to see that we've sort of segmented them out based on a child's age range. And once you click on this, you'll see a little PDF pop up that you can save. You can print it out, share it with your partner, share it with other adults in your child's life, and then with your child as well, and really set them up for some of those healthy online habits. So I'm going to stop there. I've been talking for quite a long time. Tara and Justin, just wanted to give you the opportunity if you have any comments or any questions about anything that I've shared so far. And then, of course, if anybody would like to use the Q&A function to ask a question, please feel free to do that as well. And I'll just take a sip of water while we do that.
Teodora, I appreciate you going through. There's quite a few expectations. I think, like I said earlier, this is a process. This is a lot, and I do appreciate the conversation and the talk that you have there around setting structures, modeling behaviors. Those are very similar things that we ask our teachers to do in classrooms every day.
Right.
Is structures, set expectations, and it's just as important that we do that even as parents. And like
Absolutely.
I said earlier, I do have a 14 or a 15 and a 23-year-old. I get to go through technology expectations with both of them, and I'm still continuing with the 15-year-old. And as far as setting up you showed the parent expectations there, the PDF.
Yeah.
I remember when my daughter got her first cell phone, that was part of the unwrapping of the cell phone as a present was the tech expectations and going through that process with her.
Yeah.
And making sure that there is that open communication, and that when rules, when expectations are not met, that there is a process by which we have to make sure that we come back around, reteach those expectations, but there is going to be some sort of consequence that goes with it. And those consequences are going to vary. And I think coming to an agreement with students or with your child about what that consequence looks like ahead of time, I think is just as important as setting the expectation as well. So
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, Justin. Couldn't agree more. And I think being flexible in this process is also really important. So, especially if you have a really young child, if they're like a first or a second grader, setting up or creating a tech agreement or a screen routine with them now doesn't mean that it's going to have to be the same one that will stay throughout. So until they turn 18, it is, again, we use the word process before. It is a process. It is something that can grow and that can change. We don't want to be rigid throughout this process. We want to make sure that sort of one way of thinking about it is that tech agreement kind of grows with our child and changes with our child, because of course their needs are going to be different. Their abilities, their levels of maturity are going to be changing a lot as well as they get older. And so yeah, I love that story. The unwrapping of the phone was accompanied by the unwrapping of the tech agreement, if you will. But yeah, that's a really important thing to do, and to set those rules up as early as possible. And like you said, to also be very clear on what the consequences are going to be as well. So if rules are not met, or if they're broken once, multiple times, what's going to come next. And then of course to try and be as consistent with that as possible. Yeah.
And I think to continue to remember that kiddos are going to make mistakes, and
absolutely
they are learning and growing just as we are as adults. They're not going to be perfect all the time. So it's okay when they do fall down and don't meet an expectation, but we need to be there to counsel them and get them through that, and make sure that the structure gets put back in place. But kids are growing, and they're learning how to maneuver within the world, and they are going to make mistakes.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Thank you, Justin. So I know we're a little bit over time. Tara, I just want to give you an opportunity to say a few words if you'd like before we wrap up.
Hi, Teodora. I just want to thank you very much for being with us tonight and sharing your expertise. And I just really appreciate it. I think the parents will get a lot out of this. And I think it's really a great thing for our students and for our parents to learn about. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Again, I just want to thank the whole district for being so involved with this topic of online safety and being such great collaborators. For us, we're always excited to work with districts who are excited about this topic. So with that, I think we'll wrap up. I want to thank everybody for joining us again, and hope you have a really great evening.